hello to everyone joining us this evening. Joining us in your present time zone. I am not here to presume what hour of the day it is for you, but it is presently the top of the hour, and that means that we are right to begin our panel on tiny games. I will be your moderator, and I guess that makes me also Dungeon Master. Um, Brandon O'Brien. I am a poet, writer, and game designer from Trinidad and Tobago, and one of the co-hosts of the podcast Speculate, which has involved us playing quite a few tiny RPGs in the last couple of weeks. So while I am not an expert, I do think that I am learning quite a bit in that regard, and would like to discuss that a great deal more with these two lovely folks that have joined us today as well. Who I will now invite to introduce themselves to all the lovely attendees, starting with Valerie.
Hello, everyone. I am Valerie Valdez, she, her pronouns. I am the author of the Chilling Effect trilogy and the forthcoming space fantasy Where Peace is Lost. You can also find my short fiction and poetry in various places like Uncanny Magazine, Nightmare Magazine, and so on. And I stream, I'm a video game variety streamer on Twitch at The Kids Are Asleep.
Nice. And next, Stephen.
I'm Stephen Grenade, he, they. I am a writer, a narrative designer, and as of about 30 seconds ago, the co-editor of a new speculative fiction, flash fiction, and poetry magazine, Small Wonders, which I will say is open for submissions, and hear the thundering, galloping hoofbeats of people rushing to send us new and cool things to read.
Small one, this is really rad. I've seen what's been put out from the inaugural issue, and that's actually really cool. So I guess we will begin with the obvious softball question, which is, what is your favorite tiny game in any medium? Your favorite tiny tabletop RPG, your favorite tiny video game, anything of that sort. What stands out to you? And I will open by mentioning a thing that I know that Valerie has played as well. Because we played it together, which is every once in a while, the tabletop RPG designer Grant Howitt will make a one-page RPG and just put it out on Twitter for other people to see it. And a couple of years ago, Howitt made a game called Stone the Crows, in which you just play a group of birds trying to steal the crown jewels, and it plays as silly as it sounds, and it was one of the most hilarious experiences that we've had on a stream with other writers, because that was fun as well, knowing that writers were going to be the most catastrophic version of a bird that it could possibly be. um and yeah, that, like, the memory of playing it and reading it, in fact, still stands out very brightly in my brain. So that's the example that I would give, but I would like to hear what stands out to you as well. And I'll start with Stephen.
Oh,
I put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's fine. I also do like Grant Howitt's stuff a lot. I was introduced to his work when at a writing retreat, one of the writers brought Honey Heist, where you have a very intricate clockwork plan to heist something, and also you're all bears. And in fact, it goes as awry as you would imagine. The tiny game I'd like to mention, which is edges on the larger side of tiny, but is still, I think, delightful and wonderful, would be Untitled Goose Game, where you are a horrible goose going around and terrorizing a village. It's tiny, it's delightful. My youngest child had a lot of fun with it, where it spent most of the time with the goose flapping the wings and saying, "I'm expressing dominance." So it's just charming.
It is.
That was
Uh,
extremely on my list as well because yeah, Untitled Goose Game is just it is a game that you can take a long time playing because there is so much extra content, basically, just kind of optional things to do. But if you just do the main stuff, it can be pretty quick. And my children also love being horrible geese, so very fun. The one that I'm gonna bring up is also a TTRPG and one that Brandon is familiar with because I believe you GM'd it for us, but On All Frequencies by Nathan Blades. And Brandon did a mix up of that with his own game, Sound Clash. Um, Is Soundclash the Clampdown the full name of it, Brandon, or just
Uh,
Soundclash, and then the Clampdown was the one that you were playing with the specific group?
yeah, that was that
Okay.
specific group's series called the Clampdown, but the name of the game is Sound Clash. Yes.
Yeah, and so it was. So On All Frequencies is a game in which you play. Uh, well, we played college students at a college radio station during a time when something goes weirdly wrong. And so it is just it's a short game, and it is you are stuck in this basically college radio station space. It's a very, small space, kind of locked room thing, few characters, and it takes place over the course of basically one day, in very kind of like specific scene arrangements. And that was just a very fun and cool game to play. If you have was it the micro RPG, the Ultimate
Uh,
Micro RPG book, you can
mhm.
find that game in it.
It is very rad. I enjoy that a lot. Also, I just need to speak the praises of Nathan Blades as a game designer. Um, but also like there is something very charming about just being a group of people in the only active radio station 4 miles after a catastrophe has taken place, and dealing with that and your fellow colleagues at the same time. It's just a lot of obvious fun. Um, so yeah. I guess what I'll follow up with then as a result is, um, what is the particular enjoyment of a tiny game as compared to a larger thing? We are in a media landscape that, for a lot of reasons, tends to assume that a thing is good when it is big. Um, that games are only valuable if I'm paying for the biggest experience. I must be able to walk from this place to this place, and it must feel like I'm actually walking thousands of miles in the real world, or else I have not gotten $40 worth. Um, but there is something to be said for the tiny game experience. Stephen, you mentioned Untitled Goose Game, which was a riot when it came out, because even though there is a wealth of things that you can do, you're doing it in what is essentially one cul-de-sac, and you are but one goose. Um, and I'm kind of intrigued to hear what you both have to say about like what is the unique value of playing something that is very, very small rather than very, very big. And I'll start with Valerie.
So I think it's similar to the experience of reading a flash fiction or short fiction story versus a novel, right? It's this notion that you're containing a lot of experience and fun and plot and character and what have you, into a smaller space. And in this era of the hustle, sometimes we just don't have the time, honestly, to engage with a long form narrative game, or you know, like it's one thing to play the Dragon Ages and Mass Effects of the world, which I deeply love, but sometimes you just want a bite-sized something because you don't have the time to dedicate to something longer form. And even if you break it down into multiple sessions over multiple days, like the pleasure of having something that is self-contained, that you play it and you finish it and you're done with it, is honestly kind of refreshing, because then it doesn't remain kind of lingering in the back of your mind as a thing that you have to keep doing. And I think that that is one of the danger of longer form games, especially ones that are kind of like Harvest Sims or anything that is sort of a work simulator game. If you keep playing it, it starts to feel like work in bad ways versus good ways. Whereas a tiny game, you just play it and you're done, and it's refresh. It's like a bonbon. It's like, a little chocolate, and you eat it and it's over.
Yeah.
And I loved your mention of like short fiction and flash fiction, because I think for me, a lot of the pleasures of small games versus large ones are akin to the pleasures that I take from short fiction and flash fiction versus, say, novels or, sprawling trilogies. I'm in the middle of Horizon Forbidden West right now, by which I mean I'm probably in the first 10%, and it's already like, here's a board game, here's a crafting game, here's a hunting game, here's some errands to do, here's your main story, here's your side quests. And then you have something like Untitled Goose Game that has a very strong unity of theme and a very limited number of mechanics. You honk and you move things around. And getting to experience that and enjoy it to the point where, enough that you feel satisfied, but not so much that, as you said, Valerie, it feels like work is really delightful. And I also think it lets you explore things that might not be as sustainable long term. Thinking about Grant's Honey Heist, being bears doing a heist really badly is a really fun session, but imagining doing like 8 to 10 to 12 sessions to a year to years of it just would grind you down. So I really like it being encapsulated like that.
Mm-hmm. So you briefly touched on a thing that I'm also intrigued by in the sense of tiny games, which is the narrative value of the one shot. Um, uh, Especially in tabletop RPG space, the value of a one shot is the value of telling exactly the one story that you're trying to tell, and not like branch off into this one big thing. You are not trying to be a 12 episode series of a TV show. You're trying to be a very good 2 hour limited event. And in a lot of ways, some of the narrative tension therein is that sometimes the energy of playing that game is accepting that things will often not be perfect or go wrong. Like Honey Heist as a one-shot game is a very good example, because a lot of the setup is you are characters who will never actively succeed in the goal that you're attempting to perform, but you're talented enough that you could get by for a while. Let's see how long it takes until something goes poorly. And I'm kind of curious, like, what are your feelings about how narrative tension in tiny games is expressed? Like, whether there is a tension between the ideal perfect success and accepting whatever you get as your stakes by the time that this story ends, in the context of a tiny game in particular. And I'll toss that to Valerie first.
I think that when you have a tiny game, as opposed to a longer game, in a longer form game that is not a roguelike, then the sense of failure modes is it's higher. You feel worse when you fail, I think. In a roguelike, there's an expectation of dying over and over again, so it softens the blow a little. And especially a roguelike, like say, for example, Hades, not to get in the weeds too much, but that is a game that prioritizes dying, or that makes it fun by virtue of all the stuff that happens in between after you die. And so it again, it makes that part of the narrative, part of the fun. And I think in a tiny game, you have more freedom to fail, and you have more freedom to just catastrophically, have a blowout, because it's just one game. The characters are not ongoing. You're not going to have to come back to them later and try to figure out, okay, how do they get out of this? How do I deal with it? How do I solve these problems? How do I fix this? You just kind of roll with it and let it happen. And it is like, I hate to use train wreck given the number of train wrecks we have been having in the US lately, but it is an experience akin maybe more to like a sports team losing a game, where it's like, it's okay that we lost this game. Well, I guess sports players probably don't feel that way, but in terms of the narrative, it feels okay to fail, because you know that you don't have to come back to it later. You can just let it go, and it makes the journey be the fun part as opposed to the destination.
Yeah, I definitely like grew up playing D&D and other long form RPGs, and remember like having a character die after a bunch of sessions, and it was so sad. And 12-year-old me had to have a little funeral out back for my character. And then like the first sort of story focused one shot RPG I played was Fiasco, which is designed to have a bunch of people in kind of a Coen Brothers style movie where they have grand ambitions and very bad impulse control and bad planning. Um, and I'd be interested to hear from you two if you have this experience. I find myself willing to take riskier, more narratively interesting choices in small, especially small RPG games, because the character isn't going to come back. So if bad things happen up to and including death, it may be okay. Like I have played games of Fiasco where my character died at sort of 2/3 of the way through and then gets to keep coming back as like a ghost or flashbacks. And that kind of pushed me to make choices that were more story interesting rather than character preserving.
Valerie,
Yeah,
you have
exactly
thing.
that. Yeah, I know a thing. Yes, I played a one shot of Call of Cthulhu, and it was exactly that experience where it's like you sort of accept in the beginning that yes, it's possible you will survive this, but the odds are not awesome, really. Like it is a game that initially, just the entire conceit of it invests you in the idea that you are probably not going to make it, but then your goal becomes to go out in style. And I think that that is really good and useful for tiny games, especially if it's a one shot or something like that, is that it becomes more about playing the character. It becomes more about what is dramatically satisfying for the narrative. You have when you're reading a novel, you have that choice taken out of your hands. The writer makes the decisions of who is dying, who's surviving, and so on and so forth. But then when you are playing the game in a TTRPG setting, it's your ability to influence what happens, and it does free you up when it is that one shot. When you know that, okay, I'm probably never going to come back to this character, it's okay. And like Steven said, you take risks, you take bigger risks, and you are more free to engage in that kind of narrative choice making, as opposed to being more invested in keeping your character alive and whole and whatever else, because you know that they're going to come back later.
And I just want to say, to answer that question as well, very briefly, Fiasco is a very good example of that. I mean, Fiasco is narratively set up to be as intense as possible. A lot of things are happening, and very few of them are constantly good. But I had a similar experience in one of my first experiences playing Fiasco. I had a high-ranking politician accept a drug deal, and then his life just started falling apart from that. And that was Act One. I was like, "You you threw me the ball. I have no idea what to do with the ball, but the ball is mine now. So I'm gonna do something with it, knowing that the stakes are gonna be poor. I've set myself up for that. That's what we're playing. So I'm going to see where that goes narratively. And I do think that you are right in that the energy of a tiny game in part is that making those risky decisions on a narrative level is part of the enjoyment, because even if you don't know where you're going, discovering where you're going is going to be fun. So yeah. So I want to pivot from the playing into the making, because I know, Stephen, you have some design and writing experience on that end. Um, uh, and I'm kind of curious what, in that sense, in the sense of actually making those games, is the potential value not only creatively in terms of that individual project, but in terms of experience and overall production prowess, is the value of making a tiny game.
I have found it lets me sort of in the same way that in like tiny RPGs, you can take risks you might otherwise not. You can, in writing a game, play with mechanics or take approaches that you might not want to necessarily commit to on a much larger scale and test things out, try them out, and maybe that's all you have to say about it. I was saying before we got started, I was in the middle of writing my choice of games game, which only turned out to be, a slim 500,000 words over 2.5 years, and stepped aside to write a piece that ended up in SubQ magazine, where the whole conceit was, what could you do in a choice-based game if all of your choices were binary? If you could pick either A or B each time through, which is generally not a good design decision when it comes to choice-based games. You want to have 3 to 5, probably closer to 3 choices so that the player can't just go left, right, left, right, left, right. I was like, well, what if I did a story like that? And I did it and I finished and I don't have to do that again.
Okay. Can I ask also as an extension of that, like what was the thing that you learned from that potential binary experience?
So it gave me a lot more awareness in deciding how to structure choices in those style games, which actually ended up feeding back some into that choice of games game. Because sort of like if you write a short story, and especially if you write Flash, you're paying attention to your words and how they're put together in ways that you can be a little more relaxed when you're talking about a longer work. I had to pay very close attention to what choices am I offering, how am I phrasing them, and then how do they branch. That then made me reflect more strongly on that in my choice of games game that was larger and more sprawling.
Mhm. Nice. Um, and just to kind of pivot into another thing, which is not necessarily the purview of this panel, but I kind of want to include it anyway because we all also write fiction. Um, there is there is an obvious uh genre space between games and fiction because games are meant to be interactive, but in terms of size we have noted that like the quality of size is also a part of the value of consuming both of those things, in that you know that the experience will at some point be over. And I'm kind of curious if there's anything else that kind of passes over on the fiction end of making small content like flash fiction, if there's something else that can be learned production wise from playing or making tiny games that can help bridge the gap for people who are very experienced in making very large pieces of fiction but might be struggling with a flash fic or even a short story that could possibly make sense if you've had tiny games experience. And I'll throw that to Valerie first.
So I think that one thing that you can do is really go back to your mice or mace quotient in terms of fiction talk, where you're gonna focus much more carefully on one particular element, such as the milieu or the character or what have you, and just really kind of take it down to bare bones, I guess you would say. The more focused and I hesitate to use the word linear because that implies that you have to have a linear game when it's small, which is not the case. Because even in the example Stephen gave of just having two kind of, choices for every single thing, that still lends you to a replay that you can have multiple endings based on how the choices are made. You can add one extra choice and end up with even more endings. And so replayability is a thing to think about when you're doing this. But unity of time, make it a very short term time game is one way to do it. Very few characters so that you're much more focused on the characters. The location, maybe just have one single location or a couple of related locations, but just narrowing it down to just one of thing. And having one thing in particular be prominent, I think, is a good way to handle that as well, where again, whether it be the plot, the world, the character, or just the vibes. I think that's another thing that we can not underemphasize when it comes to short games, is that sometimes it really just is strong vibes, and that is okay in the way of like a cozy story.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think making you much more aware of what is working in a small space that can give you ideas that don't necessarily translate directly to fiction, but certainly rhyme, I would say. To Valerie, your point on vibes, I think about the game Proteus, which is basically you wander around an island, you're like your eyes open and you wander around an island and nature-y kind of things happen, and then the day is over and you're done. And it's all vibes, but there's something really satisfying about that. And I find it fruitful when I enjoy a small game to say, okay, What would there be a fiction analog of this if I was going to do a short story that was trying to pull out some of what's working here or would have an analog to what's working?
Nice. So yeah, these are all wonderful answers to wonderful questions, but this is the opportunity where I now give folks in the chat who are now who have been watching us, if you have any questions at all about anything that we've already discussed or anything else that you'd like to add, please feel free to place those questions in chat. We would like to hear from you as well. But while we're waiting for that to happen, this would be a lovely opportunity for us to just continue geeking out about the other tiny games that we also enjoy. Um, and I will start by mentioning a thing that I enjoy as a writer, as a poet, and as a designer far more than anything else, which is um, there is this wonderful one word RPG, the title of which is We Are But Worms, um, which is available on itch, that I can't remember the designer's name off the top of my head all of a sudden because of nerves. But I love it. One, because it's a one-word RPG before we even discuss what the word is. And I'm actually gonna save that part for everybody else. Like actually get the game and experience the game and like touch that, like get that experience immediately first. Aha, yes. From River House Games. Thank you so very much for looking for that, Valerie. Because one of the things that I enjoy about that is being literally um not even like a full A4 page on both sides, but like actually just like a small square page on both sides. And committing to only one word on a poetic sense um requires you to also contemplate the act of playing the thing. Like, how do you interpret the rules that you have been given when the rule is only one word long? Um, is something that I think is actually really, really cool. Because it will always, not always actually, but very often be a verb. But the way that language evolves means that we relate to that verb in completely different ways. And I think that putting that restriction in the hands of players asks them to think about what they're about to do as the act of play before we even actually play the game, which is a thing that I think is actually, on a poetic sense, really mind blowing. So yeah. I see if people are interested in trying out writing tiny games. Drive-Thru RPG did Pocket Quest last year, where everyone had to design small games on a theme, and they're doing it again this year. I actually know nothing about Pocket Quest, but now that I do know, thank you for sharing that, Cheryl. That's actually really rad. And that is not only an invitation for us here on the panel itself, but if you in the audience are like, I'd like to tinker with writing tabletop RPGs. Maybe if I do something small and I'm not really committed to a large thing, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to flex those muscles and get creative in a way that you didn't think that you could have beforehand. So yeah, that's really neat. But in lieu of other questions, any other examples of cool tiny games that you have also enjoyed recently? And I'll throw it to Valerie first.
Me. Okay, so I did make a list and I like sorted it by kind of game. So there's like board games, card games, phone games. I'll start with the phone game actually because I feel like phone games can be very fun short games, and the benefit of a phone game often is that in in some way there is no end to it potentially. But and I'm not talking about like Candy Crush style because that gets really annoying I think very fast. But just a game that has levels that you can complete fairly rapidly, such that you can do a few of them if you have a little bit of time, or just one of them if you don't have a lot of time. They're the kind of games you play when you're in line, right? So I love Hue, and Hue is Hue. It is a game in which your goal is to arrange colors in um, a what do you call it? Like a spectrum order. Like so, it starts with one color, and then it ends in another color, and your goal is to put the rest of the colors in order such that it transitions naturally from one to the other. So this is a visual game. If you are good with colors, it's very, very fun. If you're bad with colors, it's very, very frustrating. This is a game my mom cannot play because she has no ability to distinguish between blue and purple and gray. But if you like colors, I love Hue. Each level can be completed pretty quickly. And to me, it's just very satisfying to sort the things. I don't know. There are other kinds of games like that where the goal is to sort somehow in order or reorder things or put them in right bottles or what have you. But that one in particular, I find very soothing.
Nice. You gave me an idea for a phone game that I would like to reference at some point, but I'll pass it to Stephen first.
Okay. I'm going to recommend that people check out the interactive fiction competition, ifcomp.org. This is a computer game competition that I actually ran for about 15 years, very long, that came out of the community of people writing text adventures and later choice-based text stories. Because people were writing all these big ones, and someone said, well, what if we had a competition for games that you can play in 2 hours or less? So every game that gets entered is supposed to be playable to completion within 2 hours. And people do a lot of just really interesting boundary pushing things with it. It's been running since 1995, so there's lots of games out there. You can go back and look at like the top 3 for each year and see what people are doing and how they're playing with it. And there's just a lot of interesting experimentation going on in that space. And if you are someone who thinks you might be interested in writing like a text-based choice game, that's a great place to enter because there is a community of folks who will play all of these games and give good and detailed feedback on them. Like it's such a great game jam, sort of before game jams existed, that has this culture of like, let's give you feedback on what you've done and what is working and how, how is it in general. So IFComp. And thank you, Brandon. So you dropped the link in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Because I wanted to look it up because that sounds like a really cool thing. But when you mentioned it, it also reminded me of another thing that I've never done. I've always wanted to do, but at some point would very much like to do, and will also share with other people as well. Which is the Golden Cobra Challenge, which is a tabletop RPG and LARP competition. Well, not a competition. There are functionally no prizes. It's really just a dare to make a uh a small tabletop RPG or LARP experience under not only thematic constraints every year, but the judges' constraints also include making it such that it is easily playable by people who are not necessarily in the same room or can play at the same time, or in certain other kinds of theatrical circumstances that are also very good challenges for you to think very deeply about what kinds of play experiences you want to make for people. And I think that using opportunities like those to inspire yourself to make something that you're not like really invested in that sense, like this is an opportunity for you to experiment with the form as a creator, is a very good place to try and figure out, well, what are the things that you value, what works and what doesn't work, what are the things that you like about other games that you enjoy that you'd like to see figured out in a certain kind of space, so that as you continue making, if you want to continue investing in those things, you get better at making those things, which I think is really cool. And I'll also briefly, to piggyback on Valerie's phone game suggestion, I will mention Marvel Snap, which I typically had not imagined would be a game that I would mention in this panel. But as you were describing Hue, a thing broke in my brain about the way that digital card games work, and especially phone-based digital card games, which is an attempt to reduce the amount of pieces that you play with to a critical point that is still full of depth. So like the thing about Marvel Snap is, as opposed to other tabletop card as opposed to a physical tabletop card game where you're playing with decks of 40 at their very least to sometimes 100 or more at their very biggest. Marvel Snap only allows you to make a deck of 10 cards, and all of them have to be unique. And when you play the very first time, you're like, there is no way that this could actually make something that is as competitive as I think making a 40 card Magic deck can be. Like, 40 cards is where I know I'm putting 10 or 12 cards that are about to do the thing that I want the thing to do. I can't do that with 10 cards. What's one card gonna do with another card? And then you play the game and you realize, oh, 10 cards is actually very deep, and you can allow those 10 cards to do some wild stuff. And it helps, obviously, that it's a digital card game where randomness is a thing that is obviously not in my control, but is in the game's control. But the fact that the fact that games like Marvel Snap and Magic Spell Slingers, that is also for mobile, the thing about them reducing deck size as an opportunity to increase more challenge is actually very intriguing to me, and I'm kind of excited to see that kind of translate back to physical card games and see how you can make those things more challenging with less parts. So yeah. Any other suggestions from the lists that I know that you both have made? And I'll throw it back in the other direction to Stephen.
One thing that came to mind when I was prepping for this panel was Oliver Darkshire's one-page RPGs, which are they're like this interesting artistic expression of really funny concepts. I think most people probably know Oliver for Potato, which is you're a hobbit trying to grow potatoes and adventure keeps trying to drag you away and you keep trying to avoid it. But he also has done ones that's like Left Wing Office Cat, where you're trying to prevent the cat Jorts from getting buttered, or Pedro Pascal on the Run with a Magical Child. And it's become sort of an interesting reflection of other pieces of culture or sometimes experiences, like when Elon Musk first bought Twitter to set it on fire and people were shouting about, oh, you should go to Mastodon. He did one that was called I Do Not Want a Mastodon, which was all about you get gifted a Mastodon that now lives in your house. What are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And he also doesn't he have the one where you're a detective investigating Oscar Wilde and trying to prove that he's gay, but then a thing that can happen in the game is that you also are gay and you end up hooking up with Oscar Wilde? Like, his games are wild. They're so good. They're just ridiculous and fun and funny. And even if all you do is just sit there and read the game instead of playing it, you have a good time.
Mm-hmm. In the chat I've added yes, Death by Badger on Twitter. I've added a link to Oliver like making a small compilation of all of those one-page RPGs, included Trapped in a Cabin with Lord Byron, which sounds like a terrible experience, and that's why I want to play it. But yeah, like I think the thing that I enjoy about Oliver Darkshire's one-page RPGs is the way that you play is engaging with these like long lines of tension where whenever any of them are filled, something bad is bound to happen. But there's no way to mitigate it. You just have to decide which bad thing you want to happen. Which is also very fun because they're designed to be able to be played solo, but you can't play them with groups as well. So it's just a matter of seeing how multiple different people decide to deal with those circumstances is also very engaging. So yeah. Valerie, do you have any other suggestions that we can gift all
Yes.
these wonderful people in chat with?
We haven't really touched on board games yet, so I'm actually gonna throw out a few different board game options. The kind of like most obvious ones that people probably know about more are things like Settlers of Catan or Ticket to Ride, which are very fun. Settlers of Catan is kind of a resource building trading game where you take over different places on a board, and your goal is to, win, reach a certain number like of things, and then you have won the game. Ticket to Ride is a train track building game where your goal is to essentially create a train line from one end of the country to the other, more or less. And the other ones that I want to call out are the Forbidden insert thing here by Gamewright. The ones that we have in our house, which are very fun, are Forbidden Sky and Forbidden Island. There's also Forbidden Desert and I think some other ones. But Forbidden Island is very fun because that one is one where you have like a randomly generated board, basically. You have up to 4 players, and the goal is to try to get certain places and obtain idols that you then have to take back to a helipad. And every turn, parts of the island sink or are flooded, and those pieces are removed from the game board when they sink, such that your ability to move around the board then changes, which is a really cool way of keeping you on your toes and forcing you to strategize in particular ways about who goes where. Your roles are randomly assigned, so you don't know who you're going to be playing, and when you start the game, you don't get to pick. And each role has different abilities that affect how you play the game. So that's Forbidden Island. That one's super fun. Forbidden Sky is fun because you're trying to build a rocket, but more than trying to build a rocket, actually, you're trying to set up a series of like electrical conduits to be able to power the rocket so that you can escape from a platform before it falls away, I guess, and or before you get struck by lightning and die. So like that one, you even have hit points, and the rocket, it actually is a functional like thing where once you've set up the circuit, the rocket like lights up and makes noises and stuff. It's just literally an electricity thing, and so that one is deeply fun. And both of those you can definitely play in under an hour, up to 4 players, and good for kids. They're pretty easy to learn, and you can help the kids out as you play.
Mm-hmm. Nothing more fun for kids than teaching them not to be electrocuted while building a rocket. But yeah, that sounds really rad. And Lauren Ring in chat mentions the thing that I wanted to mention as well. Betrayal at House on the Hill, which is a very interesting example because um, from one session to another, you're essentially playing an RPG in the space of an hour and a half to 2 hours, which is actually like the thing that I enjoy the most about Betrayal, which is as a board game, it's not much shorter than many other board games of its physical size. Um, but because you are given a character and your engagement with things like omens and other potential threats in the game as you move from space to space are literal narrative prompts that you get to engage with via roles. It's essentially playing an RPG where the cards are the GM. And I think that that's really cool because it means that streamlining that in that way makes it a shorter one shot than a human run one shot would be, and far more chaotic as well because no one is making a conscious decision about what they want to happen to you. The game just decided, oh, you rolled the hunt this time, so I guess this is what's going to happen. Um, and I think that that's very I like it's one of the ways that I think would be particularly interesting to teach people who have never played an RPG run by a GM before to have their first experience play Betrayal and go, no, the game told you all of these things are going to happen. Um, just pure chance was responsible for the circumstance that you're in. Now we can deal with having someone put these circumstances upon you in an actual RPG. So yeah. Again, I will remind everyone as we have 6 minutes again, if there's any other questions or if you have your own game suggestions as well to offer in chat, please feel free to do so. But in that 6 minutes, I guess we have time for one more recommendation each before I ask you all to let these lovely folks know where they can find you afterwards. So I'll throw it again to Stephen.
Since we've been talking about sort of tabletop games, I want to recommend Spyfall, which is a small bluffing deduction card game where everybody at the table gets a card depicting a location, except for one player who gets a card that is blank except for the word spy. Then the players take turns asking each other questions about the location, trying to uncover the spy. But if the spy can guess where they are, like a casino or at the beach or something like that, then the spy can say, I know where it is, and win the round. So you end up in this tension where you're trying to ask specific questions that might trip up the spy and trying to give answers to prove that you're not the spy, while at the same time not giving so specific a set of information that the spy can go, oh, this is clearly at the beach. So you play it over several rounds. It's very fast, and it's a very interesting push-pull because, like, you've got that mechanism of where you want to be very specific to find the spy, but if you're too specific, the spy will figure out where you're at because there's no guarantee you're asking the spy from the beginning.
Yeah. Spyfall is fun. Valerie, do you have any other suggestions?
Oh, I have so many. I'm gonna say, let's go with, this is a card game. It's derpy and fun. It's called Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. And so it is essentially a slightly more complicated version of like Slapjack. If you've ever played just standard Slapjack with a regular deck of cards, each card has depicted on it a taco, a cat, a goat, a cheese, wedge of cheese, or a slice of pizza. There are additional cards that complicate things slightly more, but nevertheless. And what you do is you put your card, you have to put a random card down. I mean, it's just top of the, top card down without looking at it. And as you put it down, you must say taco, cat, and you and the other player go back and forth. Taco, cat, goat, cheese, pizza. When the card you put down matches the word that you say, you have to slap the pile. Whoever slaps the pile last takes it. So, like slapjack. But there are so many endless variations of how this can go, and it just becomes chaotic and fun, and you forget where you were in the list. And it's a deeply fun game as long as you don't break a finger doing something untoward. But again, easy to learn, easy to play. You get through it quickly depending on how many players you have, and it gets hilarious very fast.
It does indeed sound. That sounds like a lot. Nothing about Slapjack is a thing that I have cultural knowledge of. So that game sounds like a physically hostile game to play. But it does actually sound like a very fun kind of chaotic that I would probably enjoy. So yeah. Thank you so very much for joining us for this panel and sharing all of your lovely ideas and suggestions. I hope that folks in chat, if you're looking for a thing to play, I hope that any one of these suggestions now gives you an idea of a thing that you or your family will enjoy. But before we go and let everybody pass on to their next events, I'd like to ask the both of you to let everyone, all of these lovely attendees, know where they can find you, both on the internet in general and for the rest of this weekend's Flights of Foundry, starting with Valerie.
You can find me online at valerievaldez.com, also Valerie Valdez on Twitter, Valerie Valdez author on Instagram. The kids are asleep on Twitch, and I have a lot of more things to do for the convention. I think my next thing is I will be interviewing guest of honor Sarah Gailey.
Ooh, that's nice. And Stephen.
You can find me online. Go to linktree/sgranade, SGRANADE. It's brand new, shiny. I put that together today so I could stop telling people to go look at Twitter. And it links to everything. In terms of the convention, I will be moderating a panel called No Narrative, No Problem, looking at low and no narrative games here in, I think, about, oh my gosh, 3 hours. And then a bunch of other things will be happening involving me, some on Saturday, and then like a 3-hour block on Sunday, after which I will not speak at all. I'll also go check out, I saw that there were a lot of recommendations in the Spire channel on Discord. I will go take a look there, and if folks have questions, you can ping me there.
Mm-hmm. And as for me, I have been Brandon O'Brien. You can find my newsletter and all of my links at brandonO'Brien.xyz. My next Flights of Foundry panel will be community management and toxicity in 2 hours' time in a room I have forgotten the name of and did not write down. But I will be here doing all kinds of things between this evening and tomorrow evening. And you will find more about me on the internet. But until the next time that I see you all, I will ask you all to have a lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of Flights of Foundry, and we will see you soon. Please feel free to interact with us in the Spire chat and Discord. But until then, have a good evening.